The Warfedale Lintons are enigmatic speakers. Let's talk about it. And a big hello to my English-speaking audiophile friends. Here I am again with the much anticipated review of the Warfedale Linton Heritage Speakers, personally butchered by yours truly, Pedro Diaz. Hope you can survive this one. And so here they are, the Lintons. They're here. They've been here for a while, for a long time. I bought them a long time ago. I bought them myself. No one has given them to me. I am a consumer. And if you know this channel, you know that I had some shortcomings in the past, but everything is well. I want to thank the Warfedale people, to the president, Peter Como, for the great amability and very quick response to some of the experiments that I had to go through. And also Greg Fitzgerald from Mofi for helping me out with some parts quickly and free of cost. This is probably the last review of the Lintons before a new model is announced. But you're here because you want to hear what a real musician thinks about. Someone who makes music every day sitting next to other people playing instruments that are naturally produced. But let's first talk about the construction and the format and how they are made. The Lintons are a three-way speaker, bass reflex, with an 8-inch woofer, 200 millimeters, 5-inch mid-range or 135 millimeters, and a 1-inch dome soft dome tweeter. Sensitivity is 90 decibels, which means they're pretty easy to move. And the impedance is 6 ohms. According to Warfedale, at minus 6 dB, the extension is down to 35 Hz. I don't get tired of looking at the Lintons, even though they're just a simple box design. It's just a box. Maybe there's nothing special about it, but the way they design the frames, how they integrated the grills to the borders of the cabinet termination, the speaker binding posts, everything there says to me business. These speakers say quality. I had to take them apart at some point with some experiments, and I was able to observe that they're very well made, that the MDF cabinets are very thick, and I think for the price, they're really, really well made, and I can't think of anything else at that price range that's made like that, and I think Warfedale has done a great job. In terms of the design, we have to remember that Warfedale is pointing at somebody like me, or maybe you. If you were born in the 60s or the 70s, you grew up looking at speakers like this. You know, for our parents, our uncles, grandparents, they needed to buy something at the time that was efficient and that was big, that could reproduce music at a scale, big scale. Because at that time, there wasn't real bass back then. Speakers didn't really have bass, except for when the Advents and the KLH came in the 60s. But out of that, most people didn't even know what a subwoofer was, or they didn't use subwoofers except for the most ardent audiophiles. So you needed a big box that would reproduce a natural sound in a home environment. In the 80s, there was a lot of money spent on audio gear. And this kind of box was everywhere. It was a preferred format for a home speaker. It would be the main speaker in your home setup. But that all changed the day that a very smart company at marketing came up with the concept of the satellite and subwoofers. And since then, everything got smaller. But the appearance is typical of a speaker that I used to see when I was a kid, when I used to be a paper boy, and I would go to the houses to knock on the door and ask people to pay for the subscription. And I remember hearing Michael Jackson, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, on a Pioneer system with speakers like that, that kind of a size. I think it was probably HPM 100s. But it was, the kind of speaker that had that boxy shape, big. I had a neighbor down 5 houses from my house that had a Kenwood system that was beautiful, and he also had kind of big speakers like that, and he listened to Barry White, and you could hear all the treble, and they probably had like 5 drivers. It wasn't the same design, but they were big speakers, and they made a big sound, and they sounded good. Even outside of the house, you could hear him listening to Barry White with the deep voice and all the hi-hats and all the electronic. But we have to remember, these are made by Warfedale, a British company. And actually, as a paper boy, I inherited a pair of Dentons. One time at 6 in the morning, I was delivering papers, and somebody had thrown away a pair of Dentons in the garbage, and I picked them up in my bike basket. The tweeters were broken, but I experimented with tweeters, and I was impressed because the woofers, even though they were paper cone, the edge was butyl rubber. And at that time, most speakers, American speakers or Japanese, had foam surrounds, and those disintegrated. I was really impressed that my speakers had basically a bicycle tube rubber. Who wants these? Again, we have to remember that the market is for people my age. People who listen to classical music, but also rock. Like, organic, dry sounding rock. Led Zeppelin, Neil Young, Pink Floyd, Zappa. Basic instruments, analog instruments, Fenders, with the tube amps, and drums that were tuned down a little bit. That's the kind of sound that these speakers can really, really honor and reproduce. If you know the sound of British speakers, you know that they never have an exaggerated speakers. Actually, I had some BMWs that had a little bit of a bright sound. But, this allows them to play louder without the sound falling apart, before them losing their composure. My EPOS speakers, my Celestion speakers, they're inefficient, but once you get them going, they play music evenly across the range. They don't dismantle. So this is kind of like the tone fingerprint that they reproduce. Around 85 decibels, it's a very nice sound. Maybe a little bit warm, but I wouldn't go any further than that. I would blame anything else. You just really have to be careful of the amplification that you use, and the cables and how you made them. I had them in my living room with the Rotel Tribute A11, and I felt like they would change character as I turned the volume up. Once you pass the 85 decibels, 90, 91 decibels, The speaker it seems to favor the mid range a little bit, and I think it has to do with the stability of the amplifier. So if you don't have an amplifier that's very, very stable and has a lot of current, I know the Rotels do, but somehow I can't explain how they sounded different at low volumes than they sounded at high volumes with the Rotel. It's it's inevitable that when you reach 90 decibels and past that, the speakers open up and they don't have a lot of compression, but the character changes. You hear more coloration, and also you hear the coloration of the room. That's actually the biggest thing. But what I'm trying to say is that it needs very good amplification, stable amplification, good current supply to keep the speaker well balanced across all the band and all dynamic ranges. That's because it's a three-way speaker. This is why most manufacturers don't really make three-way speakers. I mean, it takes a specialist to do this. And I think it's a great thing, though. Because of that, they have great attributes because they're three-way. But I think it's hard to make a three-way speaker and keep it, with the crossover and all that stuff working perfectly across different dynamic ranges. But what do I know? I'm not an expert. I tried different amps. I tried my Iota VX, the Rotel. I tried my Audio Note P2SC. They all sounded great. And tubes can also move them really well. But they don't have the control that my solid state Pass Labs 150.8 or the XA25. I really fell in love with the way the Linton sound with my Pass Labs XA25. It was a very magic combination. I understand it's a very expensive amplifier, $5,000-$6,000, and you have to wait almost 12 months now. But you know that I believe in the Lin philosophy, where they would sell you a very fancy, expensive turntable, made it to Nime Electronics or later Lin, with the tiny little can speakers, which were not fantastic, but it sounded great because you were putting really good information on the source, and down the chain, the cans could reproduce as much as they could. But if you put crappy information, you could have $100,000 speakers and they would just reproduce all the crap. That's why I feel like the Lintons, they scale really well. They're going to stay in my house for a while. And they can deal with really high-end amplifiers. However, I understand that their place in my house is as hi-fi speakers. They are all-purpose SUV speakers. When I want to listen to fun music, loud music. So what are you looking for? The most impressive thing is how they can do it all. They can be refined. They can play very beautiful classical music, but they can also play Marilyn Manson. They can play heavy metal. They're all-purpose. But this turns them into a hi-fi speaker, not high-end. They have their own high-end speakers for that purpose, Warfedale. But let's compare this to motoring, to your car. Some people enjoy driving around in their luxury vehicles, slowly, enjoying the view, enjoying the road, and the sounds of nature. But others like to drive with a lot of energy, having fun, but also like maybe angry. Like they're trying to channel some negative anger. Like they're trying to use their car as a weapon to channel the rage. How you listen to your stereo is very important to determine what kind of speakers you're going to buy. If you want to sit in the middle row of Carnegie Hall in the orchestra level, and you want to hear every subtle movement of the bow and the violin, the cello, the viola, the blowing of the flutes and the clarinets, you will be able to receive that. Not like if you're somebody who's just angry and you're the one who's actually making the sound with the stereo. If that's what you want, then you just want to make noise because you need to drown out the voices in your head and just get rid of all this anger. You can do it. Get the subwoofers and listen to reggaeton. But the Lintons are actually capable of doing both. And that's what's really interesting about this speaker. But let's talk about the three-way design. And I think it's a really good thing. Because of that, you have the option to hear more clearly into certain instruments. Like the human voice.
I told that girl she better stop. Lord, I said before I lose my mind. I told my baby she had to change her ways. One more day I won't be here to stay. She's drinking so much blues and she's taking me away. She's driving me out of my mind, I can't stay. I got them empty bottle blues. I told that girl she better stop before I lose my mind.
All of these voices in the human voice range, woodwind instruments, everything in the middle of music, which is where most music lives, has some very nice prominence. In some cases, when some instruments are close mic'd, then maybe it can be bifurcated. It can be segmented a little bit too much from the main voice. If you listen to like a saxophone or a bassoon that's too closely mic'd, you can hear a little bit of coloration. The high frequency reproduction is refined. They are extended and they're full. But you have to find the right electronics, good cables, and harmonize it correctly so you can really reproduce those really good heights. If you think that the Lintons don't have good tweeters or good treble, then maybe you're not familiarized with the British sound. If you listen to speakers like Mission and Haybrook and Harveth, that's the BBC sound. You gotta understand that. If you don't like the Lintons, you possibly wouldn't like a pair of Spendor BC1s. So you have to understand the personality and the accent of the speakers we're listening to. The reproduction of the piano is also very convincing through all the wide bands, especially in this recording of Malcolm Frager playing Chopin on a Börsendorfer Imperial. But I like the highs because the strings sound very silky and very delicate. I think that where they really excel is really in the percussion. All kinds of percussion. Let's listen to the first example. And listen to the triangle in the March of the Toreadors of the Carmen's Overture by Bizet. Don't lose track of the triangle. I bet you never noticed how important is the triangle in this piece. It's always playing, no matter what. And the Lintons are able to reproduce it continuously without any interruptions when the bass drum plays or the cymbals. It never affects the sound of the cymbals or the triangle. Another thing I like about the speakers is that for me, they don't really need a subwoofer. Especially if you have them in a smaller place. Actually, if you have them in a small room, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a lot of boominess. You're going to have to put a sock or two inside the bass ports, reflex ports in the back. In this room, actually, I'm losing bass because the bass is filtering out. But even here, they have great bass. And I think if you buy these speakers, you'll never feel like buying a subwoofer, unless maybe if you use them for home theater or something like that. But I think these are speakers for listening to music, for enjoying music. Not to be negative or nasty. It's just for music. But okay, once in a while you can step on it. It's fine. But don't forget, the important thing is to find really good electronics, really good amplification. These speakers on their own, they're not going to sound good. And it's pretty easy to make them sound bad with bad amplification because they're so transparent. So you really need good stuff. If you don't have a good amp, they're not going to sound good. And then don't go around blaming them and saying this and that about the tweeters. That's not how it works. Even with my Rotel, which I think is a decent amp, I thought it was a little bit grainy at times, the sound. They didn't keep their shape the way they do with my past labs electronics. I know I'm being a snob about this. If you have an NAD, if you have musical fidelity, if you have, audio lab amplifiers, those are great. That's fine. They're gonna work beautifully, but especially under 90 decibels. But if you put $10,000 amplifiers, $15,000 amplifiers, they're going to scale up. They're going to sound that good. pretty much everybody has come to my house and listened to the speakers. Their jaw has dropped. They have an incredible potential, no matter what amplifier you hook up to them. Now, one thing that I have an objection to is the sound of the woodwind instruments, because I feel like you don't have the same palpability as something like quads or higher end speakers. There's a little bit of a distance between the audience and the speakers. It's a hi-fi speaker. It sounds like a hi-fi speaker, and that's the price of making a speaker that does everything well. It doesn't excel in anything special, but it does pretty much everything well, and that's good for you, the consumer. The timpani, for example, it's a good example of something that actually works pretty well with the speaker. It's got the metallic attack, but the depth, the tonal texture. Although I think a timpani is like a glorified steel drum. Okay, don't tell my colleagues, they're going to kill me. Now, what really, really makes the speaker special is a reproduction of the drums. The drum kit is something special with these speakers. You know, all this dry rock, like I said before, Pink Floyd, Jethro Tull. It's got those recordings that are a little bit lo-fi, like, the old school recordings. And this really pays homage to these kind of recordings, to that time, to that epoch. And not just the tom-toms, the tam-tams, the crash cymbals, the ride, the crash cymbals, the double bass drums. They're all very well reproduced. But also, if you like techno music, electronic music from the 80s, like this group Scritti Politti, I think they were really geniuses when it came to programming, electric bass on the keyboard or MIDI drums. The sound of the snare, on the MIDI was pretty decent. Listen to this. So it is a great rocking speaker. It's also good for jazz. It's fantastic. And maybe for classical. But for classical doesn't convince me as much because it doesn't have that special spectrum. They don't disappear as much as other speakers. This doesn't mean for the fanboys that they're not good. Be careful in the comments, be gentle. I know that you're going to tell me that yes, you can make them disappear, but not like other speakers, like coaxial speakers or mini monitors. Those have a tendency to they're easier to disappear. But these have great soundstage where they're sitting right now, and they do project a great image. So, to sum up, I really feel like for rock they're fantastic. And with very good amplification, you're going to be happy for a long time and you're going to get goosebumps on a daily basis. Great design by Peter Como. And he was also a founder of the Haybrook Company. I'm very happy with them, and they're a great complement for my quads because in the summer they don't work so well, my quads, and I can play them angrily. So let's see what the Parapelometro thinks.